Can you talk about what President Carter is saying and also President Carter's relationship with President Obama, Cy?
Yeah, sure. That's one of the most amazing things. You know, Jimmy Carter has been a pariah for the American Jewish community and for Israel ever in recent years because of just the kind of conversations you've heard. He's gone and made visits to the Hamas leadership, and he's gone and seen Bashar Assad of Syria. It turns out he has a pretty profound relationship with Obama. He met with him privately about 10, 12 days before the inauguration. I wrote about that meeting. It was just the Carter and his wife and the President Obama and his aide David Axelrod. And since then, I think there's even been more, perhaps even more private meetings. And so I do understand that it seems inevitable, of course, they would discuss Hamas. And the fact of the matter is that what Mr. Carter said, Khalid Mashal, the head who runs the Hamas office in Damascus, I actually interviewed in this piece in the New Yorker. He says literally the same thing. In a sense, he said Hamas leadership would be willing to leave Syria, as Bush always wanted, if there was an agreement on the Golan Heights. He said he would not stand in the way of Bashar Assad. And he also said, Khalid Mashal, who said that Iran would be against this kind of an agreement. They would be isolated, as the Israelis think. It was pretty straightforward stuff. What we may, and Mashal has said to me in that visit and previous visits, the Israelis keep on wanting me to talk about Israel publicly and say I recognize Israel. For a man of the resistance, that would be suicidal. But what I do say is, and I've said this to publicly, and he said it to Carter, I understand there's a state called Israel. And he just won't say what the Israelis want him to say. The whole question of how Bush presented things and how Obama presents things are really, it's quite amazing. Obama talks about mutual respect. And again, in this article, I mentioned that instead of going to the Syrians and demanding that they kick Hamas out of Syria. The Hamas has had an office there for years in Syria, much to our anger, the Bush administration's anger. Hillary Clinton, to her everlasting credit, sent two of her aides to see the Syrians a few weeks ago, and their message was so different. They said, look, we know you won't kick out Hamas. That's an act you won't do. We won't shame you and ask you to shame yourself. What we want you to do, instead of kicking them out, is try and help us help us get Hamas to be more moderate. Similarly, about Hezbollah, instead of demanding that Syria, as part of any agreement, disavow Hezbollah, disavow Hamas, or disavow Iran, what the Obama people, the message they passed in Syria was, look, we think that perhaps the Bush administration was wrong or overzealous in thinking how much control Syria has over Hezbollah. We're reevaluating that. There may not be as much direct control. So you have a new government in place that, I must tell you, for all of the cavilling and for all of the concerns I have about Afghanistan and other actions of Mr. Obama, what he's doing in this part with Syria and Hamas is pretty interesting. He seems to be more willing to accept the reality than the Bush administration was. They saw a world that I don't think existed.
Seymour Hersh, I want to thank you very much for being with us. I do want to ask, you never got to talk to David Axelrod about this article? We have 10 seconds.
I talked to him about Carter. He was very open. But once I started talking about what Obama wanted to do with the, in terms of getting the Israelis to stop the war short of the inauguration, the war in Gaza, I was treated exactly as Bush would treat me, you know, which is, are you kidding? No response, no response. Make appointments, don't do it. But that's normal for White Houses. They like the press. Every White House wants the press exactly the way they want it, which is they want to feed you and take care of you. If you raise questions, they don't like you. Big deal.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh joining us today. His latest article in the New Yorker magazine is called Syria Calling, the Obama administration's chance to engage in a Middle East peace. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we look at a remarkable woman in U.S. history who bears on us today with Social Security and other issues, maybe FDR's closest confidant outside Eleanor Roosevelt, Frances Perkins. Stay with us.